Suprabhat and Namaskar to one and all. Welcome back to the 2023 edition of the Indo-Pacific Regional Dialogue. My name is Divya Rai and I'm privileged to be your host for the last day of this 3-day annual conference. As most of you are already aware that IPRD is an annual recurring apex level international conference of the Indian Navy and is the clearest manifestation of Indian Navy's international outreach at the strategic level. The overarching theme of this edition is geopolitical impacts upon the Indo-Pacific maritime trade and connectivity. You will, and I'm certain, agree that the first 2 days of this IPRD have certainly lived up to its billing. And many of our experts, each of whom you have enjoyed during the sessions in their own right, and they have done us proud. Today, for the third time in many days, they will be providing you many more perspectives to fill your intellectual appetite. And so, here we are ready to commence today's proceeding. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the theme of this fifth session of the IPRD 2023 is private industry in the safety and security of Indo-Pacific maritime trade and shipping. And to provide a brief overview of the session, it gives me great pleasure to invite the Director General of the National Maritime Foundation, VAdm Pradeep Chauhan, to provide us a brief overview of what we might expect from this session. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Divya. Excellencies, flag officers, commanding and otherwise, members of the diplomatic corps, members of the Fourth Estate, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. You must have heard Divya say twice already, brief. So I'm going to be providing a brief overview of a brief, no subtlety with Divya. Good morning. It is a singular pleasure for me to be able to present to you a very brief overview of what we might expect in this particular session of the final day, concluding day of the 2023 edition of the Indo-Pacific Regional Dialogue. You might recall that on the first day I made mention of some of the benefactors whose beneficence enables the NMF to actually run these shows, and I emphasized the fact that many of them are individual naval officers and individual naval wives and children who are honoring their parents or their husbands or their spouses or their own deep involvement with the Indian Navy in particular, and maritime India in general. I would be failing in my duty were I not to also mention a couple of institutional benefactors, and foremost amongst them, apart from the Indian Navy, who is the host for this morning and this whole session, as a matter of fact, I want to make particular mention of the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, which is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, civilian think tank in India, with over 52 or 53 years of operation, and they have consistently been assisting India in pretty much whatever India thinks it needs. The NMF and the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung have a relationship that spans a few years now, and it is being solidified with every passing year. So Konrad Adenauer Stiftung is a self-effacing, not very in-your-face kind of organization, but it would be churlish of me were I not to acknowledge their great contribution to the running of the various activities of the National Maritime Foundation, of which this particular IPRD is one. Another really important partner of ours is the Energy Research Institute, otherwise known as TERI. And TERI and us have a number of activities that engage our collective attention and the attention of the government of India in its many echelons. And so once again, I want to place on record the great debt of gratitude that we owe to Dr. Ms. Vibha Dhawan and her indefatigable team at TERI. Finally, we also are supported by the Larsen and Toubro group, who provides us within their Defense IC a fellowship, which they in their magnanimity have said has nothing to do with L&T per se. It is just L&T's effort to be able to promote intellectual effervescence within the maritime domain of India. So the products that emanate from the fellowship that has been set up by the L&T are not designed for L&T alone, they are designed for India. And what we do with that is that we promulgate these in the form of white papers. And if you ever look at the NMF website, you will see that NMF's website does not promote the production of 800-word opinion pieces, op-eds, what I think about the world, what the world according to GARP. We only produce serious research. And all our research papers are properly produced on the web and online within the NMF's website. So thank you to all of these benefactors of ours. I think that we hope that over the years, your activities, your beneficence will inspire others, larger, smaller individuals. The NMF is the Indian Navy's knowledge partner and receives its sustenance principally from the Indian Navy. But we can't spread maritimity just between the Indian Navy and us. So the Indian Navy, the Indian National Shipowners Association is well represented here by their president today. And we think that that's another area that ought to be actually involved in this whole business of the promotion of maritimity. Now, we have a great deal of hope that much of what we're going to say will, in fact, be generated here before you in this particular session, which talks about the role of private industry. Now, maritime connectivity cannot be sustained, leave alone enhanced, without the direct and continuous effort and involvement of the private industry of any country, and India is no exception. Now, are we therefore talking about India alone? No, we're not. We're talking about private industry at its regional best. And therefore, we have various regional examples of private industry. Some are inspiring, some are depressing, some are kind of in the middle, because without private industry, this whole business of maritime connectivity will simply not sail, leave alone fly. Yesterday, we heard the Honorable Minister for Port Shipping and Waterways when he enunciated the great change that has occurred in the Indian maritime firmament in the sense of the promotion of landlord port models. And all our major port authorities, which are the 12 major ports that happened to be the only functional major ports at the time of our independence and don't have anything to do with major versus minor, they are all moving across to the landlord port model, which means that the government will own the land, the port will own the land, but the terminals, the operations, the actual movement of cargo or human beings will all be handled by private enterprise. India and the Indo-Pacific will therefore, despite its many differing political structures in the different countries of our region, all either thrive or survive or die, depending upon what breath of life is either breathed into that process by private industry or is sucked out of that process by private industry. So private industry can do both things. It can enable us to live, to fly, to thrive, or it can enable us to simply have all our visionary statements translated into simple rhetoric with no execution. The onus of government cannot be minimized simply by passing this onus on to private industry. So this is what is required is obviously a partnership, a public-private partnership, not of the old kind, but of a new and more dynamic level. Yesterday we spoke about flag shipping, if you remember. And I started my overview yesterday in the morning with an example of how we were not able to lift oil at a particularly sensitive point in time simply because we didn't have enough flag shipping of our own. Today, SCI is the only Indian shipping company that has VLCCs. They have only 5. And yet, these 5 VLCCs are at the top end of the VLCC-ULCC divide. So they're all at about 305 1,000 deadweight tons. Indian flag shipping is picking up, but it's not picking up fast enough. Government is seized of the problem, but the problem is intricate. It is tied up to finance. It is tied up to the Ministry of Finance and their policies. It is tied up to the manner in which the cost of loans and the cost of financing requires to be undertaken or undergone by private industry in India. One of the reasons why there has been much slower progress than normal within, say, for example, Sri Lanka, and the opportunities that are offered by Sri Lanka and were passed on by the government of India to a private industry is that, hello, these are projects that will take a decade. And in that decade, how is the cost of money? How is the cost of money to be factored in? And therefore, long gestation periods have thus far frightened Indian private industry. I dare say that this brings me to a really important feature of today's session in terms of its overview. Of course, all the details and all the real meat will be provided by none other than my colleague, former chairman, Admiral Sunil Lanba, who, of course, you are well aware, has pretty much been there, done that in every particular possible job. But I do want to emphasize that this business of industry must be understood. The word industry must be understood. I've had the privilege of addressing on more than one occasion the various business councils abroad. So the India-America Business, or the America-India Business Council, the Australia-New Zealand India Business Council. And my constant refrain is this, and this is what I would like you to remember. There is a difference between industry and shopkeepers. Shopkeeping is not the same as industry. Shopkeepers come up and say, hi, I've got this bottle, I've got this notepad, I've got this pen, here's a tie, what do you want? And if you take my bottle, I'll give you 5% discount on it. Shopkeepers offer a range of choices of existing products that they have. Industry doesn't do that. And industry seeks to figure out what will India or Bangladesh or Sri Lanka or any of the countries of the Indo-Pacific, what do they want? What will they need going forward? What technologies should we invest in? What materials should we be investing in? Because industry has this difference from shopkeeping, that industry has the ability to have longer gestation periods absorbed by the depth of its pockets. We also heard yesterday, or day before yesterday, I think, one of our really important features from our minister, who said, we can handle everything, all need. All need can be handled. We cannot handle greed. And therefore, all too often we have an adversarial relationship between private industry and public enterprise. One feels that the other is just a bunch of greedy Shylocks. The other thinks that the first is a bunch of incompetent nincompoops. Surely, we cannot progress down this path. And therefore, we find that countries like China, where actions emanate from fiat, are more efficient. Of course, they're more efficient, but look at the cost. Are we willing to pay those social costs? And if we're not, then we better get our act together. And the way we get our act together is to get private and public enterprises in one go, in one symbiotic relationship. This applies everywhere. It applies to space. If you think that China is moving on maritime domain awareness with the Yaogan 36 triplet series of satellites which are currently in place, or the Gaofen series of satellites which are in place, simply by virtue of the military of China, the PLA, you are sadly mistaken. China is emphasizing on a daily basis civil-military fusion. And it always has civil first and military later, because the military cannot move independently of its civilian counterpart. Likewise, academia, we are represented heavily today by academia, and we have been honored by students and their presence over the last 3 days. I want to re-emphasize all military activity and much of private activity depends upon the ability of academia to intellectually underpin all this with actual products of academic content. If all we're going to do is cut, copy, and paste, that also badly, then we're not going to progress at all. We're just going to have these conversations which are genuinely meaningless. Finally, I want to talk about digital issues and address the fact that the cyber world will be a major determinant of everything that is maritime in nature. Right from maritime domain awareness to subsea cables. In India, there is, why India? Across the world, there is practically zero governmental ownership of subsea cables, and yet 99% of all internet traffic is proceeding on undersea cables. There are complications here. There are legal complications. All of these address the issue of maritime connectivity, and none of them can be addressed if private industry will not step up and say, we are here and present, and we are here and future. So I think that that's what we hope that this session will provide us. Basically, we are looking for the session to provide us hope. But since all militaries are aware that hope is not a strategy, we hope that they will be able to generate a strategy behind it. And strategies differ from plans in one particular way. A plan will always tell you what is to be done, who is to do it, where is it to be done, when is it to be done, how long is it to be done by. All these questions are answered by a plan. A strategy must answer all of these questions plus one more. Why is it being done? And if industry can emphasize the factor of why it is doing it to itself, you will find that Indian and regional industry will bloom. Thank you very much.